I'm Will. This is my dad, Bill. This is basically, I guess the name I'll probably go with is Kitchen Table Christians. All we're going to do is just talk, like we've done millions of times before going out in my life. The way I remember him and my aunts and uncles doing it. The way I remember my grandfather doing it. It's just conversation that happens about what's going on in the world, what's going on with Christians, the Bible, whatever topic comes up, however it goes. We're just putting it out there so that you guys can join in, and hopefully in the future we can add maybe more people once I figure out how to do volume for more people. But this is it. We don't have anything really planned except for maybe where we're going to start. After that, we let the Holy Spirit take it where it goes or wherever we go. Sometimes we might go off on a tangent or down a rabbit hole. It happens. It's a conversation. It's not 60 minutes. So just keep that in mind. Today, this week, what we're going to talk about is a lot has happened. A whole lot. And that's just this week alone. Last week, a bunch of stuff happened. And I feel like we can't talk about this week without talking about what happened last week. So for those of you who don't know, last week, 5 red heifers arrived in Israel. This is crucial for the third temple and for the priests to be able to do their job properly. They have to have a full red heifer. They are extremely rare, and yet somehow 5 of them were produced in Texas, of all places, which I guess makes sense. It's a cattle country. But they're there. This week, we had the Nord Stream pipeline hit in 2 different places. Russia accusing NATO of doing it. NATO accusing Russia of doing it. Both threatening declaring retaliation. Russia annexed 4 sections of Ukraine, which I can't pronounce. Not even going to try. And then now Zelensky has applied for expedited membership into NATO, which would drag everybody into a war. A lot of people are thinking this is World War III. So there, you're up to date on the past 2 weeks and the importance.
Current events. It left out that Russia and NATO have implicated the United States in the pipeline burst.
NATO did?
Yes. So we're kind of in a limbo spot right now.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I guess my first thought is, as Christians, we have such an eye toward the rapture.
Yes.
All the time, as the Bible says we should. But we don't know when the rapture is going to happen. We don't know if it'll happen now or 10 years from now. We might very well have a third world war in between now and the rapture.
Could be.
The only thing I know for sure is that Russia's still around at some point to raise war against Israel.
Yes.
So that's probably not a good sign for us going into a war with Russia.
Probably not.
But
there's a lot going on, and to really set a stage for this, you need to back all the way up to, I think it was May or June. I can't remember the exact time of year, but planets aligned. And the Bible told us they would. We also had 2 red moons, which the Bible told us we would, toward the end time. As far as astronomy and astrologists are concerned, the alignment of the planets is a forerunner of the end time. Also, this week, Jupiter showed up so close you could see it with your eyes, and with a pair of binoculars look at it, you could see the striation on the planet so that you could tell the colors and things like that. These things all herald the coming of the Lord, along with all the other things that we always talk about: wars, rumors of wars, famine, pestilence. Oh, pestilence, Hurricane Ian. Ian, however you like to say that word, that name. But the whole point is that, my point is that all these things are just signs that present where we're headed as a world, not a nation, a world. Bible prophecy of the Old Testament is all centered on Israel. It doesn't care about South America or North America or South Africa. It cares about Israel. And if we keep that in mind as we discuss these things, it'll help, because we need to look at it through the eyes of how does this affect Israel.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure it does. And things are going at a breakneck speed. I'm 42 years old, and I already feel like I've seen more change in this world than Grandpa did in his entire time. And he went from people riding mostly horses to putting a man on the moon. But it took the better part of his lifetime to do all of those things. Now, maybe advancements aren't as fast or as meaningful. Let's face it, the next iPhone's not altogether that important. But the speed at which we're hurtling, and this does go with Bible prophecy also. It says knowledge will go to and forth around the world, basically at an unprecedented pace. We're smarter than we've ever been, while at the same token, amazingly being dumber than we've ever been.
I've always been amazed at the number of things that my dad knew how to do, and he never passed that information on to me, so I don't know how to do it, and therefore I can't pass it on to you.
It's...
Biblically, he was very good, though. Passed on a lot of information to me, because he wanted me to know things.
Yeah. Well, okay, let's look at it back toward the events that are going on. So the church, we have our role. But let's face it, the church isn't nowhere near as strong as it used to be, at least as far as America goes. I hear some great things are going on in Africa. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be honest, that's about the only place. It seems like Christianity's on...
China's Christianity is growing like crazy in North Asia and Southeast India. It's growing really rapidly. And the Ukraine has a surprising amount of Christianity springing up there. War did do something. It's been a common practice that whenever there is war, Christianity spreads. Some of the reason is fear. Some of the reason is I need somebody to protect me. But mostly it's just the fact that you put Christians in a battle scene, they're going to try to spread the word, and the word is being spread.
The other thing with that is Christians have an amazing amount of peace about them. So even in battle times, non-Christians are going to see how Christians handle that.
And don't get him wrong, it's not about being shot. That just doesn't somehow sound peaceful to me, but
no, when you're being shot at,
it's knowing the end result of what happens if you do get shot.
Now, that's not to say some Christians don't worry. I've known some Christians that'll worry their head off over simple things.
Even though the Bible tells us over 60 times not to worry.
It is crazy to think about, though, just how quick we are. How close it seems to the end.
Yes.
Because we are seeing things that... I'm not up on the astronomy aspects of it as much as you are. But something else, and we didn't even mention this. This happened last week, and I don't even know if you know about this. Did you hear that the Israeli new prime minister came before the UN and said they are ready for a two-state solution of peace?
Yes. And, there's a book out called Eye to Eye, and in that book, it outlines what happens to the world every time somebody talks about dividing Israel. Every time. And so we were immediately followed in less than 5 days with a hurricane, because the United States is backing that. And so some people don't believe that weather is affected by anything of any kind. It's all just nature, it just happens. But God directs these things. And if you look at weather events, especially here in the United States, they are connected directly to those events that the United States pushes in Israel. Every one of them. Give you a very quick overview. When the United States, by President Bush, George Bush, decided to do peace in Israel, 10 days later is when the bombings occurred on the Twin Towers. That's kind of a random connection. One doesn't have anything to do with the other, we think, and yet God allowed it to happen. So maybe it does have something to do with it. And it's been that way. Our President Donald Trump decides to move the embassy to Jerusalem, made all of Israel happy, because the United States finally recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, which we have never done in the past.
But I want to tag on to that real quick. Every president since, what was it, Clinton or Reagan, has said and made it, every president, even Obama did it, said that they were going to move the embassy from, what is it? It was
Tel Aviv.
Tel Aviv to Jerusalem,
And
but
didn't
not
do it.
one of them ever did until Trump. And I do think that that is significant.
Well, I think there's more significance even than that, because when Trump did that, gas prices were the lowest, the economy was fluid and efficient, people were getting back to work after having the epidemic that we had. Things were really looking up, and they did not start looking down until we got a president who decided that we're going to divide Israel. And President Trump had the idea that we're not going to do anything to Israel to hurt them, only to help. And when we reversed that stance, we began to have issues, fires everywhere. It goes on and on. It's just part of...
Yep.
Need to keep in mind that all of these things fit Bible prophecy one way or another, and they all relate back to Israel, and they all relate back to God and the fact that Israel, the Israelis, are God's chosen people.
Yep. Here's something else that nobody ever thinks about. The devil is here to steal, kill, and destroy. His language is the language of lies, right?
Yep.
If the Bible tells us all of this is going to happen, and that weather events and things of that nature, pestilence, all of it, are going to be God's retribution, God preparing, God moving things toward, God punishing us for trying to split Israel, then the devil's going to give man a way to ignore it. And I think he has done that with global warming, climate change.
Yeah.
He has convinced a large swath of the population of the world that man, which feeds into our own pride of ourselves, is the ones responsible for everything that is happening to us. And we, as men, are smart enough to fix it. And we can't. So the devil has presented us this nice little gift wrap to the entire world saying, this isn't God. God doesn't exist. This is you doing it. Follow your own path. Ignore all of this because it's not God. It can't be God. It's climate change. It's what we are doing to the world. And lo and behold, the entire world's able to shut off their brain and say, wait a minute, this is way too fast of an escalation in weather events for it possibly to be done by us this quickly. Maybe we should be looking at God, but instead, no, it's just climate change. It's our own fault.
Yeah. Well, I don't necessarily believe in climate change. There are events that have happened throughout the world and throughout time that lead us to a warming earth and having a cold earth at one point. So I don't have anything to gain or to lose by talking about climate change, but what I do know is man is responsible for a lot of the problems. Mostly he's responsible for it because he's trying to become God himself.
Right. Well, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's a convenient way
Oh, it
of
is.
taking God out of an equation that God is very much a part of.
Yes, we need to recognize his part of it. Because he told us in his word that if you do this, then there's going to be a consequence. And if you want peace in your land, if you want your land to produce, if you don't want drought, if you don't want your plants to all die because it's 1,000 degrees in the summertime, then turn to God. And if we turn to God, he'll heal our land and he'll take care of things. His promises are everlasting. And that's, to me, the biggest thing we need to remember. He promised that seed time and harvest would continue until he comes. So global warming's not going to change those seasons that we have. It might adjust how long certain seasons last and how short others are. We could easily go, in Oklahoma we have a bad habit of doing it, going from summer to winter with only 1 or 2 days of fall. And right now it's above 80 degrees today. So it's supposed to be above 80 today, so it could easily be that way again this year, and it has been recently.
Feels like a cooling trend because of how hot it's been all summer long. But here's something else, since we're talking about crops and everything. This year, between the war in Ukraine and putting it into a large portion of the world's fertilizer, heat waves here in America that has decimated crops, heat waves in China which decimated crops. I think there was a heat wave in Europe that decimated crops there. The world's about to go into a very hungry state this winter. Almost everybody's confirming that to some extent, that a lot of people are going to be starving this winter. Now, we know that one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse is pestilence. Now,
he hasn't arrived yet.
no, not yet, but if we go within the next couple months and a lot of people start dying from starvation, disease is going to follow because of the bodies. And a lot can be wiped out in a very short amount of time that way. And if you question me, all you need to do is look at what happened with the Black Plague in London when so many people died so quickly that the rats just moved that disease across the entire city, killing, I don't even remember, hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, I
Can't remember. But it's happened in the past. And so when we're looking at end times, a little bit of forethought and seeing. Now, that's not to say starvation hasn't happened before, because clearly it has. But that's just it. Where do we look? Where's that dividing line between how should Christians now be preparing? Well, obviously spiritually, but
we're not going to prepare for any of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, because that's after the rapture. And we believe, at least I believe, that the rapture is going to take place before we go into any tribulation. And I do not see God's church being beat up, bullied, bruised, broken, bent down. The Bible says he's coming after a church pure and white. He won't let his bride get beat up before he comes to her. So it makes sense that the tribulation would happen after, which puts a whole lot of things in perspective, takes us all the way back to the red heifers. Have to have one to have the temple. First time they're going to be ready is around May, I believe. And the cattle will be 2 years and 1 month old at that time. If they don't have any blemishes, they're eligible to be sacrificed. Now, the only issue with that is, I don't expect to be here, because that also happens after the tribulation. So if we look at red heifers being in Israel, that sign, you know, you're supposed to recognize the times. No, nobody knows exactly when he's coming. But you should recognize the times, and you should hear his voice. Listening for Christ. I saw a thing yesterday, I see it regularly, but a guy said, I'm no longer looking for the signs of the times, I'm listening for the trumpet.
Yeah, that's a good
And
one.
I like that, because that's where we're at. Every Bible prophecy right now has been fulfilled to require us to go. Now, talk about a revival, and if we're seeing revival spreading in Africa, I see telecasts all the time that 3,000 people are lining up to serve God. My question is, how are we lining up to serve God in the United States? Are we not going to have that same kind of revival spirit hit the United States, or are we?
Man, I don't know. Because I look at that, I wonder what's going on in America. I'm going to be honest, I think American Christians have in large part gotten lazy. It's too easy to throw on the TV at night instead of reading the Word of God or taking 10 minutes to go pray. Nobody expects a Christian to start off with 4 hours of prayer, but we don't even seem to have anybody trying to achieve 30 minutes of prayer a day. There just seems to be, and I'm not saying all, there are many great prayer individuals at our church, people who study, and there are other churches around the country. But as a general rule, it just doesn't feel like there's a massive push right now for it. So here's my thing to say. Only God can bring about
We've lost your train of thought.
revival. Only God can bring about revival. But we know he listens to the petition, and a lot of revivals have come out of people seeking the Lord. I don't understand why we can't just go to church every day praying for revival until God brings us revival. Why can't we gather together every night and say, pray, we're going to pray for revival for an hour. Don't know if it'll happen or when it'll happen, but we're going to seek the God over it because it's that time in our country and our land needs it.
Well, I think maybe we're reaching that direction. Not only has our church done it and the Assembly of God denomination, but the Church of God of Prophecy held their General Assembly just back in July here in Oklahoma City, and I was privileged to go to that one night. They were talking about the same thing, praying. They had a United Methodist gentleman there, and he got up and spoke about praying, that the end time is here. We need to pray. But one thing else I have noticed among more people, and in particular about me, my heart is telling me to witness. My heart is saying, you need to tell somebody about God today. My heart is saying, oh, you missed an opportunity there.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't like missing opportunities. But it's coming to me in such a way that now I bring Christ into every conversation because people need the Lord. And the Bible says the fields are going to be white for harvest. Well, if this truly is the tribulation, then the fields ought to be white.
Yep.
We need to be raking them in right now as best we can.
It feels like it too. See, I've been having that feeling for a while too. If I see somebody and I don't take that time to go talk to them, whether they be homeless or at a gas station or on the other pump for me, I start to feel guilty like, man, that's an opportunity lost. I need to be taking as many of these opportunities. But not only that, what I found all this month, our church on Wednesday nights have been doing prayer. And I find myself greatly anticipating it. Even though I'm so relaxed and so tired, I doze off half the time during my praying. But I'm still excited for it. But what I've noticed is that it's covered over. The past 2 nights, I've had time, and when I have it, I'm like, you know what? I just want to go up and pray. Even if it's just for 5 or 10 minutes, I want to seek that presence of God and just... Yep. And I've always wanted to, but that for some reason, as of late, that desire
Is overwhelming.
it's kicking up all over the place. Dylan, who I've basically been helping disciple for the past year and a half at my job, finally, I don't know, 3-4 months ago, broke through. It's been a year and a half of him trying to serve God, getting attacked, knocked back down, to where now it's amazing listening to him talk. And the relationship with his father and his brother has been healed. They are starting to go to church all together. Bobby and Dylan are changing in a way that I don't think you would have realized that you would even recognize. Bobby was always a good person, but now his relationship with God is going next level. And I don't even think he realizes.
I don't know what church he attends either, but I know he's a godly man. He always has been.
Well, there for a long time, he wasn't. He just started going back to church about, I don't know, 8-9 months ago.
Good.
His son that he was estranged with, their relationship is being healed by the grace of God. It's going on fire. Things are happening in this country. Now, I'm not going to lie, I'd like them to go a whole lot. I want revival. I want it. I've been praying for it now for 7 years since I came back to God. But, man, it does feel like we're getting close, and I long for it. I long to see the miracles that I've heard others talk about.
Yes.
I do.
I miss them. And I tell God pretty much every day that I miss those things that I've seen in the past, and I want to see them now. I want to walk into church and see a person in a wheelchair get up and walk and run around the church. I want to see handicapped folks being healed and going about their business and doing things they were unable to do before. The blind, the deaf. There's just one thing that does bother me. And I don't know where we got off on this idea, but I hear requests coming in for people who are sick and afflicted. And the older they are, those prayer requests begin changing to God help them make a good transition. Why are we giving up on the elderly? I mean, not just because I'm getting there, but because, it makes sense that if God can heal somebody who's 20, he can heal somebody who's 80 too.
But I'm going to go with something else too. Why does so much of the elderly seem to be giving up in these last days? Like they have nothing left to contribute.
I think a lot of that is society advising that there's not a lot left to contribute. It's young people have the energy. Old people have the wisdom. The problem with wisdom is wisdom likes to think itself through before acting. The problem with energy is it doesn't like to think itself through before acting. And so I think a whole lot of it has to do with just the time of life. Yes, there's a lot to be contributed, but our elderly in the United States are not as respected and not as appreciated as they are in other places. There's many countries where the elderly are put on a pedestal. They're sought out for, if you have a problem, you go to them for advice. You look to them for wisdom and knowledge. One of the things we're also leaving behind in this country is history. Just because we don't like it, we're going to knock a statue down. Well, that's not the brightest thing to do. You need to be reminded of what history was so you don't repeat the same mistakes again. Now, some people say history runs in a straight line. Others believe it runs in a circle. And so whatever was there once, it's going to come back. I think that none of that matters. What matters is, do we learn from our mistakes or are we destined to continue making them? Christians are no different. We make the same mistakes. Oh, I got to tell you this. It occurred to me this week that Israel, when I was a young man, when I was a young boy, I could not understand Israel. How can those people have a cloud that leads them by day and provides shade, fire at night so it's warm and it's lit and they can see where they're going? How can they complain about God? and get themselves in so much trouble so fast and all the time, keep going back to the trouble. And then I started thinking about us this week. Well, I guess we haven't learned so much because God shows us stuff and we just keep going back to our old ways, which brings me up to that Commonwealth Games bull and service of Baal. That's what it is. And if you watch the videos on that Commonwealth bull thing, they were worshiping that bull so much so that they didn't even get rid of it. They were supposed to take it apart when Commonwealth Games were over in England and Birmingham, England. And when it ended, so many people rose up against demolishing the bull that he now stood in a square downtown, Centennial Park or something like that. He stood there until mid-September, at which time they decided to move him inside because he can't handle the weather.
All right, so for those of you who don't know, the Commonwealth Games is kind of like Olympics for British people. I'd never heard of it up until this point. But they have an opening game ceremony. And at that ceremony, they had a giant bull come out into the center stage.
33 feet tall.
Mechanical, so it was moving on its own. And they had a bunch of people scared of it. And a woman comes up and puts her hand and tames it. And then she rides it, and all the other dancers and stuff start worshiping it. Now they say it has to do with whatever, some kind of economic rights thing.
They're at Birmingham because they had issues and the cattle industry was big in Birmingham.
But here's the thing about it. It very much depicted Baal. It very much resembled much of the same idol worship that came with Baal. No Christian that I know of watched that and didn't see that imagery right away. Now, some have gone back and said, well, it was just what they decided to use. The devil is all about deception. He's going to present you something in a way that makes you want to accept it, only to remove it later, to where only that which it is there. So it might not be about Baal worship for now, or that might be the lie that is being told, only to have that lie pulled back later when nobody seems to care anymore.
Once again, remember I said look at things through the eyes of Israel. And Elijah killed the prophets of, I call him Baal, he calls him Baal, killed all those prophets, 450 of them, along with the prophets to Molech. He took care of all of that back then and told the people, choose you this day who you will serve. It just makes sense that if he's that active, just so you know, I did a little research on that, and there's 17 countries right now that still worship a bull. So those 17 countries are not looking at that thing as just an idle situation representing Birmingham. They're looking at it as this worship is going worldwide thanks to the Commonwealth Games. But we have to be open to God to see and hear what we're supposed to see and hear. It's a failure on our part in many ways. I'm sorry, but it is.
No, you're right. Real quick, remember to click the like button or subscribe if you enjoy this. But most of all, pray for this channel and pray for these conversations that God directs them and they help somebody. It doesn't seem to be stopping. Hinduism is on the rise in India. And I didn't know this, but Hinduism's apparently a really violent religion. And they are growing fiercely. Saw an article. I haven't had a chance to fully read it yet, and I'll probably do that this week. But the Pope has signed off on, what is it? Chrislam? It's a mixture of Islam and Christianity being brought forth into...
Can't work.
Well, it works for Islam. That's part of their thing. Deceive everybody until you can bring them fully over and get rid of the other. But So there was a push. Now I need to read the article to see fully. I know this Pope, some of the things that have come up on this Pope, like there was an interview he did where he said he does not believe in hell. And Vatican quickly tried to scrub that, but it had already gotten out. And as always, it's apparently now the thing to say what elderly people, leaders, are thinking when they say something. We know because we do that all the time with Biden now, apparently. Biden doesn't say what he means. Biden just says something, apparently, and the press will tell us what he means.
But I also think he doesn't mean what he says sometimes, too.
Probably.
He's just saying. I don't know. There's a lot going on. Let me give you an idea about, we discussed Hurricane Ian. If you look in Genesis, the Bible says that the Spirit of the Lord moved across the waters. Satan has a counterfeit of everything. So is it possible that the spirit of Satan is what moved across the waters and got the United States hit 3 times by a hurricane? Somebody had to lend themselves to him to make all of that go together, and that's what we talked about with the Israeli thing. But Hurricane Ian is easily going to go down as the most costly hurricane in history.
Yep.
Now, I'll admit, a whole lot of that costliness is because now it costs an arm and a leg just to build something, where it didn't used to do so. But why is it when we spend an arm and a leg to build something, it never lasts as long as when they didn't spend an arm and a leg and they built? A Roman road lasts for 2,000 years, and we build a highway that can't even make 30.
30? We
Maybe
can't
you
build
can
one now
explain
that makes 5.
And for those of you that don't know, this, in a week from today, the Red River rivalry takes place between the University of Texas and the University of Oklahoma in the Cotton Bowl, I believe.
Cotton Bowl.
Yeah, and in Texas. So they call it the Red River that divides the 2 states as the rivalry. Every year, and I find this just fascinating, but every year the same bridges between Oklahoma and Texas on the Oklahoma side get worked on and cut down to 1 lane with a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. Every year, and they start around the 15th of September, so that it's at this time in October that they're in the midst of cutting down the lanes. You go on down to Texas, they have their arms full with all kinds of road construction too. So how is that possible? Is it an accident? Is it the final, we're going to do this as part of, our last expenditures on our annual funds? We've got to do something, so we'll repair the bridges or paint them every year, and yet I don't notice that much difference. But then, or is it, we're going to slow traffic down so there's fewer accidents and less deadly accidents that are taking place? Now, if you take that, which everything I'm looking at here expands to Jerusalem. Jerusalem's having all sorts of problems. They got a prime minister who's divided. God's not going to let that stand for too awful long, I don't imagine. They've got a nation that has outsiders telling them how to run themselves. God is who they're supposed to be asking how to run themselves. Are they in a situation now where they're moving towards slowing things down or speeding them up? And those who believe in the tribulation, Messianic Jewish folk, would know the answer. Are they moving to speed them up because God's moving them to speed them up, which is how I see things happening? Or is everything they're doing actually going to be put on pause and hold for a while, and the temple not be built for another year or 2 years or 3 years? When that construction begins, that could begin while we're still here. They've already got the material laid aside, just like Solomon laid it up for David. Or David laid it up for Solomon. I'll get that right.
I do think we will see some aspect go forward on the rebuilding of the temple. I don't know as to how much, but we got to see something, some aspect of it, I would think. Because we've already seen
We've seen the red heifers put in place, provided they can make it to May without a blemish. That's still a ways away. And for 0 blemishes on a cow, which if you've ever seen a cow, cows kind of do what they want to when they want to.
Not these ones. Oh, and it should be mentioned that they're about to go through winter. Cattle put on a winter coat, and when their spring coats come, or their winter coats even, they can grow off-colored hair. So if one of these cattle happens to put out a white hair, then it's disqualified. And that's what we got to watch. Some people believe that these heifers are going to be the stock from which the sacrificial heifer comes. Well, if that's true, these heifers have to have young. Takes them about 8 to 9 months to have a young calf. Takes that calf to be 2 years old before it can be slaughtered, so we're still 3 years away. Do you believe it's going to take 3 years?
Here's my thing about that. And people forget, I've heard the stock thing. I don't personally. You can use it to breed more red, but I think you can't have more than 2 hairs that aren't red on the entire cow.
Oh, it's just one.
Just one.
Just
so if you
one.
have 2, it's done.
Yeah.
Just one. There can be no nicks, no damage anywhere,
Cuts, no
not
boils.
a single imperfection on the entire cow.
And they look at them with magnifying glasses.
You can't. We're at a point where breeding, you've gotten about as close as you can. Now, you can continue to breed them, but that doesn't ensure a perfect red heifer, because that's how rare.
I didn't realize this. When they burn it, it just takes a pinch of the ash, because they burn it, take all of the ash, and keep it in one specific place. Then, whenever they have to do a cleansing bath or something like that, they will just take a pinch of that ash. The ash from just one will last, what, generations, I think is what it is. It lasts a really long time because it only takes a pinch to get it done.
There's only been 9 in the history of Israel.
And almost everybody across the board believes the 10th will be the end.
Well,
Whether it be the rapture, the Jews think it will be the Messiah
restoration
coming.
of
Yep.
Israel. So, all things considered, there's a lot about this red heifer business that's important. But it's such that there are people who roam the world looking for red heifers that are without blemish. And to find 4 of them the same year, they've never found even one for 2,000 years. So it's kind of,
And it was 5, not 4.
5,
they found
yes, 5.
5.
How did that happen? It's God is how it happened. That's
The guy had been, it's funny, I think it was the guy who was looking for him, either looking for him or breeding him, who had prayed to God, he's a Christian, that he wanted to help Israel out. And so I guess God had laid it on his heart to do this. And
he was a cattleman.
it's mind-blowing to think that we are this close with 5 of them, that basically you only need 1
Yep.
to get through. Just 1. And it shows how close we are. Now, all eyes are on Israel, but something else that I've noticed, and I've been noticing this, I'd say, for about, 8, 9 years now, that I've noticed it, is there is a general feel among most people that things aren't right in this world and that we are hurtling to an end. Some will call it change, whatever. That a lot of people don't understand. Now, as Christians, we know and we see it coming like a freight train. But there are non-Christians all over the place who think something's coming, but don't know what. Islam thinks they're getting really close, which makes sense because I'm fairly certain what they're looking for is the Antichrist. But there seems to be an unsettling in most people's heart and souls about what is going on. And you hear them all the time. Non-Christians, especially if you're around them, will talk about Israel and what's going on there, or the war. Everybody just has kind of a uneasiness to them. And I think that's, when you look at just us alone here in America, and it's pretty much worldwide, there were a lot of talks just 6 months ago that civil war was most likely over world war. Now that's changed. You've got the economy, which around the world is just decimated. The Dow's closed yesterday, I think, at 28,000 points, and it's been dropping pretty steadily.
Wow. Didn't know that.
Yeah, you've got food and hunger going on, and that's going to become a real problem winter.
Famine.
Europe right now is looking at an energy crisis going into winter, where it's going to be hard to heat things.
Don't you find it interesting, though, that those two pipelines that had the explosions on them, forgot what they're called.
Nord Stream.
Nord Stream, yeah. Don't you find it interesting that neither one of them were operating?
Yeah, I thought about that too.
They were pressurized, but not operating.
Nothing was being pumped through. Yeah, I found that interesting too, because why are they just sitting there?
Well, 2 is supposed to be getting ready for going online. 1 was taken down. Why was it taken down? If it was still functioning, it's supposed to have some issues. It was still a valve not leaking. So if it's not leaking and it's pressurized, it could still function, but it was taken down. Also, I believe it's Norway is about to put in a pipeline that can handle all of Europe's needs for gas. This is very interesting to me, because if the Russian leader wants to create problems, he says this was blown up by the United States. There's reasons for that. President Biden
Goldman said there would be no Nord Stream pipeline. He said it back in February. You can't be like, you can't say that. And then it wasn't us. It's like the kid that's got the cookie still on stage. I didn't eat a cookie.
Yeah, well, the I didn't do it idea is out there big time. Somebody did it, whether it was Russia, whether it was... There's a lot of other possibilities that nobody really brings up because they want to dismiss that nobody's been trained well enough. And maybe you know, maybe you don't know, but the United States has been training people to be pilots and army men and SEALs and Rangers and all those other Green Beret type people. They've been training the world to do it. Now, we always think as a Christian, well, what are they training the world to do that for? To take care of their homeland? No, you don't do all that to take care of your homeland. They're doing it to fit the devil's plan of Armageddon. But in the process of doing that, you are arming physically a large number of people who can go do something like blow up 2 pipelines that are less than 500 feet below the surface. And they are. They're only around 350 at the most. One of them is down in the neighborhood of 200 feet down to it. Almost anybody could blow that up.
For all we know, they sent subs in there and blew it up. I don't know how it happened.
Actually, if you look at the Baltic, it'd be hard to get anything past satellites.
Okay.
Because there's an entry that is very narrow. You can actually go to Google Earth and pull in on the entry to the Baltic Sea and see the ships. You can see them sailing through the whatever they call that, the sound. But in any case, there are other means. You could blame Russia if you want to, because on every pipeline there are bypass pipelines. And they keep those pressurized too. But if they want to do a test on the line and insert a piece of testing equipment that is self-propelled, they just shut down the bypass line, open it, stick the thing in, set it to run, which is a remote start. They close it back up, pressurize it, and then open the gate, and off it can go down the tunnel. And they could do that, 2 of them, and blow them up wherever they wanted to. So Russia is quite capable of doing it without ever sending a person anywhere near the Baltic Sea. But I'm not blaming Russia. I'm just pointing out that we have trained the world on how to do it. Russia has easy access, but wouldn't it benefit Norway if Nord Stream 1 there and they're putting up a pipeline? You're going to need to tap into somebody's pipeline. So,
Well, new speculation has come forth that it was China trying to push war so that they can get to Taiwan, but push war. They said they very easily got the means to get to it and do it. I don't know. All I know is it seems to be
awfully
things are
coincidental,
and things are growing fast. This whole thing. I was just thinking at the beginning of the week, man, whatever's going on sure does seem to be taking forever. And then everything happens this week, and it's like, you know what? I take that back. We're moving at just the right, probably pace.
I think it's interesting to note that last week the Ukraine was taking back the cities Russia had taken, and this week Russia's declaring those same cities as Russian annexed, which is just foolishness. They either are or they're not. And
I really think the fog of war is a real thing. I don't know as to we know what's going. Everybody says, well, the media is saying that Ukraine's winning. You don't trust our media on anything else, but you're going to trust them on this war. It's the media. They're going to lie to you. Both sides are lying to their people, to other people, to keep morale, to do whatever they need to keep things to how they want them.
Yeah.
You can't believe anything right now as far as the press goes.
You just have to listen, and they'll contradict themselves in a short amount of time. It happens all the time. It's kind of unbelievable, and just being a little bit smart about things helps. George Carlin said you need to teach your children to question everything. That's not new with him, but the idea of questioning everything makes you into, what do they call those people? The conspiracy theorist. but yet it needs to be questioned. For instance, why would the Democrats hold hearings this week and going into next week to try to punish people if, for the January 6th break at the Capitol, if they're not going to even look at all of the people that tore cities apart that they supported for 3 months throughout the country, Chicago, Seattle, Wisconsin. I mean, they were everywhere tearing things apart, and nobody's been punished that we hear.
That's easy. The left isn't going to punish their army.
Well, I don't know that it's the left's army, but I know that it's the left that used them and funded them.
Well, you know what
you can follow that by following those commentators on every kind of platform you can find. There's somebody there that'll tell you.
I'm not saying they're an actual but you're not going to penalize the side that's helping you. You're going to penalize the side that's standing against you. It's not
standing in the way. Well,
there is no rule of law anymore, it seems like, as far as our government is concerned. It's whatever side is winning will do what they need to win. Except for the right doesn't seem to be doing at all what they need to do to win.
Sometimes you just can't figure that stuff out. But again, we're talking about the United States and the world when we look at where Israel is in relation to the Ukraine and Russia. Russia apparently is supplying military training and weaponry to several nations around them. If the supplier tells those nations surrounding Israel, we're going to go to battle with them, and we've given you all this equipment, we expect you to be our allies and back us up, then Israel's going to get bombed. Fortunately, Israel has some form of Skynet, I forget what they call it, and they can take out an awful lot of weapons. I saw a video not long ago about them shooting down 24 rockets were launched at them, and they got 21 of them. One of them was a complete dud, and it fell in its own country, and the other two that did land landed way off course of where they were headed and didn't do any damage to anything. So God is helping Israel have the material and the capability and the knowledge. And when you think about a country that's only 80 years old, that's pretty amazing.
Well, think about this. The U.S. is Israel's #1 supporter.
Yeah.
We've been screwing up a lot lately with the Democrat, but we are their number one supporter. Regardless, we've always provided them the most. We've always been their ally the most. Most are fairly certain that this next presidential election, a Republican will go into office.
I don't know.
Again, that's a different, but right now signs point to where Democrats don't really have a strong
Platform.
yes. Now, tying this back into Israel, if Russia knows China wants Taiwan and Russia's fighting this war right now, their best chance to do things is going to be under this current administration. If Russia can get control of Ukraine or drag us into fighting Ukraine, we have to deal with China in Taiwan, because Taiwan's our bigger ally than Ukraine is. I don't think we care very much about Ukraine other than stopping Russia. Taiwan, Biden has even said that we will put troops on the ground to help with that. But if we are too busy fighting with them, that means we are not there to help protect Israel. Our hands are full, which if we're too busy with China,
I don't know about that. Maybe.
Russia then with their allies can say, okay, you guys helped us, you've done what we've done. We can take Israel real quick and put an end to this real fast while America's, and that is where you get Gog and Magog. Now I'm going to say this because I'm confused and maybe you can help. I haven't done my research. I've studied some, but I'm by no means an end times expert on timing and stuff. Pastor, on his series, talked about Gog and Magog being at the end of the 1,000-year reign when they attack. I had always heard, and my understanding was that it would take place before all of that happened.
Well, there's a couple of wars that are listed in Revelations. One of them is just the confrontation with Israel, but the beast and the false prophet are going to be turned loose to deceive who they can, and that's when the world is going to come against Christ. That's when Armageddon actually takes place.
So then does Israel take place?
A battle within Israel is not necessary, except that when the temple, the sacrifice in the temple is made, then it won't be long until the world attacks Israel and forces the 144,000 that the Bible lists to go into hiding.
Right, but there is a very specific spot where it says God will put a hook into Gog and Magog's mouth.
Yeah.
And will draw them into Israel, where God is the only one that can save them. And several nations are listed off. I think that's 6 or 7, Iran, Turkey, a few others.
As to who Gog and Magog are, but when you're getting into wars and what's going to happen in that regard, Israel is not going to be willing to worship the beast, and so that in the 7 years is going to create war and strife. Those who are willing and those who are not willing will both live in Israel, and that's going to create a lot of trouble. So there will be a war, but not Armageddon, with Gog and Magog's preparing to attack Israel so that we can move to the transition of world order. That's what it's about. World War, if we go into another World War, World War III is not going to move us into the transition to one world order.
No.
Because that's just going to divide the world more and more. What you've got to have is a conquering group go in and have somebody set themselves up as the solution for famine, for weather, for global warming, electric cars. I still find that funny how you can tell everybody to buy electric cars and then tell them not to charge them because our power grid can't handle it. There's just too many things going on to even, it's all kind of silly. And it's silly when you think about it because it just doesn't make sense. Not that it's wrong thinking. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So we have all these issues, and well, you take natural gas out of the situation for Europe, and they're all driving electric cars, and they can't run their power companies are still running on fossil fuel. They're not running by satellite or by sunshine. They're fossil fuel run. And if you can't get gas in there to burn the fuel, then never mind. The point is that a war cannot take place unless you have people with differing opinions about what should be done. You can't have a single leader come to solve all the world's problems unless you have world problems.
Yeah.
And so you're looking at Africa, you've got a birth rate that is astronomical. I even saw a report where they asked one young man, he was probably 36, 37 years old, how many kids does he have? And he says, as far as he knows, 18. You have 18 children through your wife? He's through several women, yes. Why? He said, in hopes that one of them will survive. Just one out of the 18. He said, that's my only hope. I have no legacy to leave behind. I'm just hoping that one will survive to carry on my family. Well, I can understand that thinking, even though it's faulty. I can understand it because the world has put a lot of weight on having an offspring and leaving somebody to follow you. But what I also see is a whole lot of famine because of it.
Yep.
A lot of children are dying. And they're not just dying there. I look at India. India has one of the highest death rates ever and one of the highest homeless rates ever. People sleeping like toothpicks on a sidewalk. It's something I've never seen anywhere before. It's amazing to me that they would do that. But the whole thing is, what they need is God. They need Jesus Christ to come into their life and show them the proper way to do things, to show them there is a better way. I am the light. My burden is light. I'm not going to put anything on you you can't handle. And so if we start leading them to Christ like we should be doing all along the line, each time He prompts us, and even sometimes He expects us to be prompted because we're His followers.
Yep.
He didn't say, I'm going to move on you and you touch this person. He said, go and do it. I'll be there. You go and do it.
It's a standing order to disciple to everyone. It's
Yes.
not.
It's if you serve Him, if you love Him, you serve Him. It's that simple.
Yep.
And basically, we just need to get into the habit of saying, hey, do you know Jesus as your personal Savior? Do you know Jesus? Just not just that there is one, but who He is and what He stands for. It changes everything, but it's a hard thing to do. You struggle with it your whole life.
Yep. You want it to be easier, and it just doesn't seem like how many times you do it, it's still
Gets easier. There's still that trepidation about going forward and saying the things that you know you should say without being concerned about the ramifications. But we as Americans in particular, we're all about the ramifications. If I tell this, then my boss is going to hear about it and he's going to say, you can't do that here, and I'm going to be out of a job. Well, that would be an error on the boss's part, and you let God deal with that. God will give you a better job.
Yep.
Or no job at all. But in any case, it'll be better because you followed Christ, and He can say then, you did well.
God will meet your needs every step of the
Yep.
way.
Trust in the Lord.
That's all there is
It's
to
what
it.
I try to teach you all the time. Just trust in the Lord. He's going to come through.
Yep.
My
You do.
paycheck did not come from the federal government when I was in the Air Force. It did not come from the people that I worked for when I worked secular jobs. It did not come from the Native Americans when I worked for them. It did not come from the patrons of the churches that I pastored. It came from God and His willingness to move on people and have them give it to me. All of my jobs, all of my money, all came from Him. And I recognize that. And I guess for that reason, I also feel that I need to be giving every chance I get. So that I can, if I can't give money, I can give time sometimes. If I can't give time, I can give my thoughts and prayers. There's always something we can give.
Yep.
And not all of us are cut out to walk down the street and say, rise and walk to people and see them be healed. But all of us are in a position where we can pray that God moves on people to have that happen. It doesn't matter whether we live in Israel or whether we live in Russia or whether we live right here in rural Oklahoma.
You are right.
It is what it is.
And I think that is a good stopping point,
Okay.
a prudent one. We hope you guys enjoyed this. We plan on doing this more. Just continue to pray for the channel. Pray for everything that you can all the time. I love you guys, and I'll see you next time on A Deeper Christian Experience.
Good
Bye.
day.